Hi everyone. Yes, we're here to start an adventure in the pursuit of happiness. Yeah. Now I know actually in the long history of philosophy we've got so many thinkers, and happiness is one of those topics where so many people have so many things to say. And, we have only 1 hour, so what I've done is I've curated some of the thinkers that have really made an impact on me personally, and I hope that it will make an impact on you too. Yeah. So let me start by telling you a story, personal story. Yeah, many years ago, I went to Australia, and when I was staying there, I had a housemate. I was very happy when I was in Australia. But every morning, he would come up to me when I'm eating breakfast and he said, "Hey, Jonathan, are you happy?" It's a weird question to start the day with, right? The first time he asked me, I'm like, "Yeah, of course I'm happy," right? Every day he asks. So 1 week later, I started thinking, am I really happy? 1 month later, I started to think, hey, am I really happy? Then I started feeling, getting all emo and upset. Started thinking to myself, maybe I'm not happy. But you know what's the scary thing about happiness? It's like, happiness is one of those abstract concepts, yeah? And the problem with abstract concepts is that there is no limit to it, right? I might be happy now, but the more I think about happiness, I can always think and imagine myself to be happier. So if I can see myself happier, then of course sometimes I'll say, am I happy? No, I could be happier, right? And that can create a bit of a dilemma for us, yeah? So what's interesting from my own experience, from having this guy asking me, are you happy every day? is, you know what's interesting? Whenever we ask about happiness, we often define happiness based on what we lack. Yeah. Oh, if I had this, I will be happier. Oh, if I had that, I'll be happier. Yeah. That's interesting, right? But Socrates, the great Socrates, right? He says, the unexamined life is not worth living. Yeah. Now, Socrates himself didn't say anything about happiness, but he did say that what's important about life is that we examine a lot of the concepts. Because in the life of Socrates, he realized, so many concepts out there. Justice, friendship, we take it for granted. We use these words, but we don't really know what it means. Like in the dialogues, Socrates goes around asking people and say, hey, so what is justice? Then they say, oh, this instance is justice, that is justice. Then Socrates asks, how about this one? Then people scratch their heads. Hey, we're not sure, right? So when it comes to happiness, we may not have a full clarity on what it might be, right? So when we ask the question about happiness, right, let's examine, let's start this adventure, right? Now, what's interesting is that when we ask the question, how to be happy, do you notice that implicitly we're also asking, how should I live? Or what should I be changing in my life so that I can be happier, right? So then, before we can even begin on an adventure of happiness, let's take a step back and ask, what on earth does happiness mean? Yeah? Do you have any ideas?
For me, happiness is coming from a place of gratitude.
Okay, happiness is gratitude. Anyone else? Contentment?
Be at peace and also.
Be at peace? Okay. Any other ideas on what happiness might mean?
And equipoise.
Equipoise. Equipoise. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Now, I tell you, when I was preparing these slides, right, I was very surprised. I decided to search the etymology of happiness. Like, what did the word come from? Do you all know where it came from? It comes from, hat means luck. So to be happy is to be lucky, fortunate. Isn't that interesting? Then this got me thinking, hey, like Chinese, you always say what, 幸福, and 幸福 means what? Lucky, right? Good fortune, right? Yeah. I used to think, why Chinese New Year we talk about good fortune and luck, right? Then actually I started to search the other languages, and boom! All these languages for the word happy also means good luck, good fortune. Across cultures, I even have Arabic, this is Malay, we got Hebrew, this is the Greek word, eudaimonia. It's essentially like to be blessed by the gods, right? Good luck. Even the German, the word luck is there already, right?
They didn't pakat,
Huh?
They didn't pakat.
They didn't pakat. That's the interesting thing. They didn't pakat, but they all came to the same conclusion that to be happy is to be lucky. Mind blown, right? So then the question that we have to ask ourselves is, why good luck? Why good fortune? Yeah. Now, before I get into what the ancient thinkers have to say, let's just jump forward to modern times first. What do the scientists have to say about happiness? Yeah. The scientists, okay, essentially we can summarize as this last. Happiness is what? Source. SOARS. What? Security. Either you have material security, relationship security, or even what they call identity security. Like you have things that help to affirm your identity. When you have all this security, you can feel happy, right? Another is outlook. And we recognize right? If you have a positive outlook, you're very appreciative, gratitude, right? Then you also be happier. Autonomy. Do we have the freedom to make our own decisions, to become who we want to be? Do we have good relationships? And also, do we have skilled and meaningful activity? We do the work and we find joy and happiness in it. Now, all these factors, the sciences will tell us that all these things contribute to happiness, right? But you know what's the problem with the sciences? Science describes. Science doesn't prescribe. Science doesn't tell you what to do, right? Now, why good fortune? Why good luck? Because the ancient thinkers realized to have all this is what? You have to be lucky to essentially strike Toto 4D, right? You have to win the lottery of life to get everything to be happy, correct? Isn't it? But they went a step further. They realized one thing. Happiness isn't just being born with good circumstances. It's also the person. Because you can be born in a very favorable circumstance. If your temperament is not right, your personality, your character is not right, you also won't be happy, right? So, to be a really happy person, you need the good fortune, the good luck, to have both good circumstance, and to also have the good temperament, good disposition, good attitude, good all this, right? So, here's the thing about happiness. Most of the time when we talk about becoming happier, we usually think, okay, if I don't have security, then what do? Then I work to get my security, right? If I am lacking relationships, like sometimes lonely, then what do? I go out, I make friends, I meet new people, right? So we usually like to think, okay, happiness is within my control, I can do something about it, right? But the ancient thinkers also recognize not everything is within our control, yeah? And like I said just now, you can be born in a favorable circumstance, but maybe the person is not well disposed to happiness. So the philosophers focus on how can I work on this so that even if, regardless of whether or not I'm born in a good circumstance, I can still be happy. So again, we jump to modern times, right? What do scholars have to say about happiness, right? You see, right? There are two, in many ways, happiness is a bit ambiguous, right? But when we talk about happiness, we can flesh out, there are two major senses to it. One is happiness as an emotional state, right? What we call, the first one is attunement with circumstances. Wow, very keen, right? What does it mean? It means that I feel at home with my state of life. I feel at home. Yeah, there's sometimes that's me also. I even though everything is going okay with me, what happens? I'm anxious. I feel uncomfortable. It's like, maybe I should get this thing to solve this little irritation in life, right? Then that is what they call not being at home. You're not attuned with your circumstance, right? Another is engagement with the activity. When you do the whatever task that you're doing, are you enjoying it? Are you deriving happiness, pleasure out of it? Yeah. The last one is endorsement of whole life. You know, when sometimes we take a step back and we look at our whole life and say, this was great. Yeah. That's another kind of emotional state of happiness. Now, philosophers also recognize that sometimes we can also be happy because of life satisfaction. So I may not have that emotional feelings, but rationally I can say, this was a very meaningful life. If you ask me to choose relive this life again, I will go through all the same options and relive it again and again and again. Yeah. So they recognize that there are two kinds. But you know, what's important here? Happiness is internal, correct? So it's about either how do I change myself so that I can arrive at this emotional state, or how can I change myself so that I can see satisfaction with my life. Yeah. Not everything has to be by changing the external circumstance. So in many ways, because of that, they recognize that we are obstacles to our own happiness. Yeah. So let's begin our adventure. And the first category of thinkers I want to introduce to you, they focus on changing mindsets. So I can't change the outside circumstance. Maybe I change my perspective to life, right? I start first with Epicurus. Have you ever heard of Epicurus? Yeah. So Epicurus in our modern times is portrayed as the hedonist glutton. Wow, Epicureanism, right? Actually, if you read the ancient text, right, the ancient materials, that's not Epicurus. Yeah. Now, the Epicureans, right, the followers of Epicurus, they say that there's one state in life that we want to aim towards. This wonderful Greek word called ataraxia, a state of tranquility, free from pain and fear.
Can die already or that?
Huh?
That also okay,
That person, yeah, sure, okay. Wait.
So you have to die before you can be happy.
No lah, you don't have to die. No. I haven't finished. A state of tranquility, free from pain, free from fear, right? So I mean, we don't do things to increase our pain, but we also enjoy the simple pleasures of life. Now, this is where Epicurus gets twisted to modern times where he's a glutton lah. It's not about enjoying all pleasures. Epicurus is just enjoy simple pleasures. Hungry, eat, but don't overindulge. Thirsty, drink. Tired, sleep. Very simple. He says that the problem is if we keep attaching ourselves to luxury, status, and power, what's going to happen? We grow addicted to it, especially luxury. Yeah. What's the problem of indulgence? It makes us needy. And I tell you, I can identify with this. You know, the first time I went overseas for a work trip, right? Wow, I got to stay beautiful Shangri-La hotel. Yeah. Then what happened? After I stay in Shangri-La hotel, now I go overseas. I must always stay in a very nice hotel, right? Want to stay in a simple hotel? Oh yeah, so difficult. Then what happens? We become dependent. Yeah, indulgence creates more indulgence. Indulgence begets more indulgence. It makes us more vulnerable to disappointment too, because I want my life to be like this. Then if it's not like this, disappointed, frustrated.
Similar to a Buddhist concept.
Similar, right? Very similar. So all these thinkers I'm going to show you about changing mindsets. You're going to see some overlaps, but I'm focusing on the slight differences, what we call the nuances. Yeah. So this is what Epicurus is all about. Okay, so we don't change all these things that makes us anxious. Let's just simplify our desires. Then the Stoics come along, okay, and they say, hey, you know what? We recognize that we have no control over what's outside of us, yeah, but we have control of what's in our heads. And I love this quote from Seneca: "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Yeah, very true. But what are the Stoics getting at? You know, the Stoics say that the only good thing that we should concern ourselves about is how to become a good person. Everything else is not important, not essential at all. You know, like think about all these kinds of opposites or differences. Notice how we like to place value, either positive value or negative value on one or the other. Right? It's like, oh, you know, I want to be, like, let's say, I want to be skinny, like, I'm overweight right now, right? So, like, oh, I want to be skinny. Then every time I stand on the weighing scale, I'm so obese, right? So, we place one value on one, and we place values on things that actually shouldn't give us anxiety, right? So, why we should be calm and neutral about all these things. We should be value neutral. That is the Stoic position. Why? Because once we place value on something, what happens? Then we have a tendency to struggle. I must have it, right? The Stoics say it's almost as if it's like a dog being dragged by the leash. Yeah, I don't want to be in this situation. Then actually, if the dog is clever, the dog say, okay, if I just follow the leash, then that won't be in this difficult situation, right? So, what the Stoics talk about ataraxia, they also say we should pursue this other state of mind. It's called apatheia. Yeah. Now, what's apatheia? Not indifference or apathy. Now, what I mean by indifference is some people think that Stoicism is just saying I don't care, right? But if you say I don't care, you're attaching a value to it. Yeah. So they say no, that's not what it is. It's a state of calm and composure. Yeah. So I give you a good example. Let's say suddenly a cockroach pop up. Then you see the cockroach, you're like, right. The Stoics will say natural response. Okay, that's out of your control, right? You see the cockroach, you're like, okay. What do we normally do next? Cockroach. Then cockroach. Then what happened? You find the newspaper, you roll it out, you try to kill the cockroach, and the cockroach starts flying there. You right? Then what happens? You are like the dog being dragged, correct? So to be And I said it's not indifference, right? Because why? It's not, you see a cockroach, you're like, ugh, I don't care. That is not really a stoic way to approach it. So the stoic way is basically, cockroach, natural response, I have no control, right? Then, okay, let me focus on becoming a better person. Then just move on with life.
Can say bochap lah.
I guess you can call it bochap, right? But I have another example to clarify. It's not exactly bochap, because a good example of what the Stoics are getting at with apatheia is, you see a leaf falling from a tree. What's your response? Fall, yeah lah. That's the calm and composure that we should be having to all these other things in life. So it's not quite bochap, because bochap is you look at the thing and you say, yeah, I'm going to bochap it. Yeah? But the leaf fall, you say, okay, fall lor. Then you move on. Oh, cockroach lor. Yeah.
You can't live with it.
No,
It's a thing of beauty, right?
Yeah, it's a thing of beauty. Yeah.
No, wait. Both. The cockroach too.
Yeah. No.
In life is beauty.
Yeah. Well, you see, so to draw a distinction, right? The stories are going to say, no, it's not because it's beautiful, right? The only good that we should care about is how to be a good person. Yeah. If I say it's beautiful, then what happens? It means I desire it. It means I want it. Okay, maybe not cockroach. I give you another example. Let's say there's a concert that you all want to see. I don't know what's a concert that you all like to go. Abba. Oh, okay. Yeah. like let's say.
Generation will not Abba.
Yeah, I know Abba too. So let's say you want to see Dancing Queen, right? Then I want to get a ticket. Then what? Sold out, right? What happens? Natural reaction is angry, right? Then what happens if we say, I still need to get the ticket? Then we are like the dog being dragged by the leash, right? But if we say, okay no ticket, then that is the apatheia.
No, wait
Yeah.
for them to extend. They only do.
Yeah, okay. So that is apatheia. Yeah? Now, let's move into some Chinese thinking, okay? We have Taoism. Ta-da! This is supposed to be a picture of Lao Tzu. Yeah? Now, the first line of the Tao Te Ching is very interesting. I'm going to...
Thing on the table.
What's the thing? It's called a guqin. That's like a ancient Chinese zither. It's 6 strings.
Guchin.
Yeah. Okay.
Musical instrument.
Yeah. Actually, Marina Square has a music school that teaches this instrument. So you can go. Okay. Anyway, so guqin, right? So Taoism. The first line of the Tao Te Ching is interesting. It says the Tao that can be Tao is not a constant Tao. And then we all look at it and go like, what on earth are you talking about? Tatao, right? Yeah. So it means that if I can tell you that there is a way, then that is the wrong way already.
The way that can be followed is not constant.
Yeah. So here's where the Taoist gives us some insight. Is there a way of happiness, or is there the way of happiness? If we believe that there is the way of happiness, then the Taoists say, this is where we become miserable. Because why? Singapore, we've got the 5 Cs. Okay, I don't know what's the modern version of the Singapore dream, but okay, at least BTO or whatever, right? Then, if we don't meet that standard of happiness, then what happens? Then people also get upset, right? But why are we following some other person's way of happiness? Why don't we form our own way of happiness? Yeah? But they go a step further. So again, this is the second line of the Tao Te Ching, still in passage 1. It says, a name that can be named is not a constant name. And it's like, alamak, what are you talking about? Names are problematic. By virtue of us living in society, right, we have many roles, we have many identities, right? Every identity carries with it expectations, obligations, correct? But where do all these expectations and obligations come from? Yeah. So think about it. Father, mother, son, daughter, son-in-law, daughter-in-law, teacher, student, boss, employee, right? All these all carry expectations. And the worst thing that can happen to us is for us to blindly accept whatever societal expectations or whatever we imagine people expect of us, and then we live out that role. I tell you, I know someone who used to say, I cannot stand the pressure of being the daughter-in-law. There's so much being asked of me. Then I say, did they really ask all these things of you? No! But still, they're going to ask of, if I don't live up to it, they're going to judge me. Right? Isn't that interesting? We hold a lot of expectations for all these names. So the Taoists say, hey, the name that can be named is not a constant name. Yeah. So recognize that just because we hold certain roles and identities, they're not fixed. Yeah. And then they have this beautiful story. Okay, this is not thought-provoking already. This is another Taoist text. It's called the Zhuangzi. Yeah, Master Zhuang. Right. So it's the story is of what they call Cook Ding. His name is Ding. He's a chef for the king So the story goes like this. One day, the king decided to enter the kitchen of his imperial chef, and Cook Ding was cutting up oxen, and then he take his cleaver and shing 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 shing, then the thing boom, and then the king was like, wow, that's amazing, right? How do you do that? Then he says, oh, when I first started out, I was just hacking through bones, and then why hack through bones means the knife break, right? So have to replace the knife every few years, right? Or every few months. It says but as I got better, I stopped hacking through bone. I started finding the what you call those little gaps, the tendons, right? Yeah, and then I put through. But I still have to replace my knife every few years. But now I don't even need to see. I know where. I just find voids, emptiness, and I put my knife through, and the thing just breaks apart easily. And like this, I do not need to replace my knife. And then the king says, you have taught me how to nourish life. Now, of course, you're like, huh? Where's the nourishing of life? It's the knife. Right? So if the idea is if we hold on to societal norms or expectations of what is happiness or whatever our roles and identities are, then if that's not us, then what's happening? We are as good as smashing our way through the bone, correct? We need to learn how to find our way so that what they call spontaneous to us. What is spontaneous and natural to us? And when we understand the situation and how to spontaneously respond to the situation, then we can preserve ourselves.
The same as the path of least resistance.
In some ways, you might want to call it the path of least resistance, but it's not quite the path of least resistance. What's the difference? It's because it's least resistance only if I understand the external situation and I understand myself. Yeah, usually when we say in modern times take the path of least resistance, there's an ignorance of the situation and myself. It's just, this seems to be the easiest way out, right? But the nuance here is I need to understand the situation, I need to understand myself. What would I do that is spontaneous, natural to me? So then that is how we will find our way and nourish life. Okay. Now let's move on to Buddhism. Yeah. So I know there's Buddhism as a religion, Buddhism as a philosophy, right? So I'm just going to focus on the philosophy. What do we have? We have the Four Noble Truths, right? Existence is suffering. I like to call this the white noise lah. Sometimes you on the radio or the TV, then yeah. So existence, just by existing, there's a certain white noise of misery around, right? But desire causes more suffering. Desire intensifies it. And I'll get to that soon, right? Letting go of that desire is to let go of suffering. And there is a way to do that. How do we do that? So you see, why is desire the problem? Because when I say I have a desire, we don't say there is a desire, right? It's always I have a desire. Notice that I have a desire. I want this, I want that, right? Now, implicit to saying I desire X, there is an assumption. What's the assumption? Is I assume that I believe I can achieve this by my own effort. So what's the problem? And why are we creating suffering for ourselves? It's because we have the illusion of self-control. See, here are 3 examples of where desire creates suffering. For example, number 1, I want this pain to go away. But sometimes we have no control over it, right? And the more we try to run away from a pain that we have no control, what happens? The pain becomes even more unsufferable, right? Even more painful, right? Or it says, oh, this is such a wonderful moment. I want it to last longer. So actually you're happy, but then now you want to make it last longer. What happens? You become less happy, right? Or let's say now you're not happy and say, I want to feel good now. There's a comedian, Amazon, when they opened in Singapore, they had this thing called Prime Now. Yeah, so it's not just they deliver to you in the 24 hours, they deliver to you now. Right? So we have this, I want to feel good now, right? But what if I can't feel good now? Again, we get upset, right? So yes, sometimes we have control over the things that removes pain from us, or over the things that can make us happy. But we don't always have control. And that is where the suffering intensifies. Yeah? So, let me pause here for a joke. How do Buddhist monks send emails? How do Buddhist monks send emails?
Send email.
Yeah, how do they send emails? Huh?
Send email.
They send without attachments. Yeah. Yeah. So no attachment, right? Why no attachment? Because have you been in a situation where you're so upset? You're so upset that all you can think about is yourself, your experience. Yeah. I can relate to it, because sometimes I have situations like that. It's like, so what happens? In that moment, I'm so attached, it's like the feeling becomes me, right? The experience becomes me. When I'm in that state, what happens? Then I feel, all the more I forget that all the more I feel that I am in full control of the situation. Yeah? That loss of objectivity makes us brings us into the state of delusion that we are in full control. But then, notice how, if we take a step back, detach ourselves, we begin to see more objectivity, we begin to feel less upset by the situation, that we can say, okay, yeah, maybe I don't have to fix it. Maybe I can just like whatever, you know. So for the Buddhists, how then do I get myself out of this predicament? The whole idea is about don't send emails with no attachment, right? Detachment. Now this is from counseling. It also produces the same thing, but they also have meditations that achieve the same thing. So what's an exercise in detachment? Let's say you think of an unhappy situation. Let's say I'm angry about this situation. Then one of the things counselors will say, okay, start first by saying I'm angry about it, right? Then you can feel the feeling, right? Then you say, now you change the phrasing. You say, I have a feeling of anger about X. Notice, just reframing the situation suddenly makes us a little bit more detached. Yeah? Then once you say this a few more times, then the counselor will tell you, okay, now you try saying this one. I notice that I have a feeling of anger about X. Even more detached, right? So again, in Buddhism, there's a lot of meditations, but even if it's not Buddhism, like I said here, example of from counseling, right? We can do these things and we detach ourselves. And once we are detached from the situation, we start to recognize, I am not my feeling, I am not my memory, whatever bad memory may be, I am not this thing. I am then able to see more objectively, and I see that, hey, I don't always need to be in control of the situation. That makes it easier for us to perceive that. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. So you can see how just now I covered all these thinkers, very similar, right? It's all about changing perception, mindsets, but they focus on slight differences. Now, let me just shift gears. Happiness, there's another aspect to happiness. Instead of changing mindset, how about we change ourselves, becoming better humans? So here's another thinker that I want to introduce you to. His name is Plato. Plato is the student of Socrates. Yeah. Now, Plato says that there are three parts within us, okay? He says there's the rational part that knows the good. I know what is good, right? Then there's the spirited part that drives us to the good. You think about it. Emotion, right? Emotion, the etymology is what? Is from the Latin ex, out of the motion. So you move out of. So emotion is a driver, yeah? So it's one thing to know the good. Then you also need feelings, emotions to drive you towards the good. But he also says, there's a part of us called the appetitive part. It desires the good. Yeah? In the ideal world, all these three will be aligned. But in real life, here's an example from my own life. I know I should exercise and lose weight. But my desire, what do I desire? I desire fried chicken. And then sometimes, I don't even have the feeling to leave the house to buy fried chicken. I don't even have the feeling to go and exercise. So you notice, one problem with one of the obstacles to happiness is sometimes we are so disunited within ourselves. We know what's the right thing to do. no mood, no feeling, or we desire something else that we know is bad for us.
You put it in a pyramid,
Yeah.
so does that mean the appetitive part is the biggest part, biggest problem, or
No, actually, I put that as a pyramid because this is supposed to be the top, right? So supposed to be the rational part is supposed to control, or not control, lead the other parts. Yeah. Now, here's the problem. Of course, on one hand, I can say Plato will say yes. We need to reflect. Like every time we have this kind of moral feelings, like yeah, I should exercise, but I end up eating fried chicken, right? Then I should reflect on myself and say, hey, maybe I should correct my desires. Maybe I should correct my feelings so that I'm driven towards the good. But what's the problem? Human weakness. I can tell you from experience, it's always very difficult. Right? I always end up eating fried chicken, right? That's why the belly's so round. So Plato actually recognizes this too. So he says, you know what? You know what we need? It's not just knowing that we have this unity in us. It all starts with wonder. We need to have wonder in our lives. And why is wonder important? As you said just now, right? Beauty. Right? When we have wonder, we start to see beauty around us. And why is beauty important? Because he talks about the gods. You know, he says during Plato's time, right? He says, look at the people who love their god Zeus. They are so they're so attracted by the beauty of Zeus that they will adopt the lifestyle of Zeus. Yeah. And then the followers of Ares, they are so driven by divine love for Ares, they will also adopt the lifestyle. And they're very happy. Regardless of what lifestyle, they're polar opposite lifestyles, right? They're all very happy in the state of life. So he says there's something very powerful about beauty and love. And it begins with wonder, right? So if I have wonder and I start to see beauty in things, and I start to see beauty in the things that I know is good. Like I know that exercise is good. Why do I dread exercising? Why is it so hard for me to desire exercise? Because I have not seen the beauty of exercise. I have not seen the beauty of eating fruits and vegetables and all the other healthy things, right? So when I open myself up to wonder, I start to see the beauty in all these things. And when beauty is in the picture, that love will make that psychological shift in us. So then what happens?
In the previous slide,
Yeah.
they will tell you you should not desire to exercise. Isn't that what the previous?
Yeah, you're right, because the earlier thinkers that I told you, all they care about, the earlier thinkers.
That's why you are unhappy,
Yes.
right?
Sure. So remember, just now I talked about the earlier thinkers, right? All they care about is change mindset. This one is not about changing mindset already. This is change the whole person. So people like Plato will tell you, no, we need to change the whole person. Some desires are good, and we need to cultivate that. Right. So different schools of thought already. Yeah. Yeah. So once I'm able to see the beauty of exercise and all the other good things in life, I will fall in love with it. And when I fall in love, my desire, my emotions, my feelings will align better. That is the idea. Right? Now, then, you know Plato as a student? Plato's student is Aristotle. Yeah, Aristotle. And Aristotle, you know who's Aristotle's student?
Alexander the Great.
Yes, Alexander the Great. And interestingly, I learned that the Iskandar is Alexander because they say they trace back to Alexander the Great. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so
Alexander, it wasn't great.
But then you say Alexander to be Alexander.
yeah, that's true. So anyway, Aristotle. Okay, this is one of my favorite philosophers. Now, Aristotle has a big shift. He's saying, okay, yes, we want to align. He agrees with Plato, right? But he goes one step further. He says, you know what? Happiness is an activity. It's an activity of us being human. Now that's an interesting thought, right? He says, he has this interesting thought for you. He says, imagine that I give you all the basic necessities that you need. Food, drink, shelter, sex, whatever, all the basic material needs, right? And all you have is just that. Can you really be happy? Yeah. Now, some of us might want to say yes, and then Aristotle asks this question. If you say you can be happy, then how, as a human being, how different are you as a farm animal? Because a farm animal also has all these basic material things satisfied. So surely, as a human being, there has to be something more, right? Of course, I know you might be thinking, oh, just all the earlier ones that say change your perspective. Of course, they're going to disagree with Aristotle, right? But Aristotle, like I said, is talking about changing the whole person, right? So maybe we need to focus on the kinds of activities that really make us human. Isn't that interesting? So what is that? Fully realizing our potential as humans to live a good life. Now, I give you let's take a poll. Which one do you think is happiness? Is happiness the freedom to choose whatever you want to choose? Or is happiness the freedom to act despite limitations and constraints?
Second one.
Second one. Oh, unanimous. Anyone choose number one? Yeah, so we notice that there can be two kinds of freedom, right? So Aristotle is also going to agree with you. We want to be free to act despite limitations and constraints. Now, why is this important? Because what is the limiting activity for us humans? We have bad habits that make us unhappy, right? Sometimes we find ourselves saying this, right? I can't help myself. I can't stop myself from doing the things that make me miserable. Like sometimes, okay, I know I got a lot of students like to say, I cannot stop comparing myself with other students. Like, I think I'm very clever, but I like to compare with the students with higher grades than me. Then I make myself miserable. Then I say, stop doing that lah. I can't help it, right? You know, that is what we call our limitation. Like, so how can we attain that freedom so that we can rise out of it? How can we attain that freedom so that we can say, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to focus on something more productive. So for Aristotle, I teach you another Greek word. It's arete. It sounds like karate, right? Arete. It's basically translates into virtue or human excellence. So how can we cultivate human excellence? That to enable us to live that good and meaningful life. We know there are things that are meaningful and wholesome as a human being. We know there are things that are bad for us that makes us miserable, right? How can we cultivate that? In many ways, we're thinking of excellence like, how people are so happy cooking or playing jazz. Have you seen people play jazz? I just discovered this jazz bar called Simply Jazz Chimes. Almost every night they have performance. Where they play the basic song first, then they go into the thing where they all do the improv, right? I'm always so inspired seeing how happy they are, right? Then they're all smiling, right? That is the kind of excellence that Aristotle is talking about, right? But you notice, have any of you play music instruments? Yeah? So I will tell you, I recently tried to learn saxophone, right? My goodness, do you know how difficult it is to play the saxophone? You don't just, it's not you put into your mouth and you blow. You have to vibrate the reed. There's a piece of stick, right? That requires a lot of physical training to be able to, otherwise I'm just like, right? So you notice there's a certain helplessness, right? It's similar to this helplessness. I can't stop myself from feeling miserable, from doing the things that make me miserable. But for Aristotle, the whole idea is the more I practice, I may not enjoy it at first, but the more I practice, the more I reflect on my activity and say, where can I improve? The more I will slowly acquire the skill. Same with cooking. Sometimes we feel very, like the first time I learned cooking, I felt very lost. I was like, oh, what do I do? Then fire, everything scared, right? But the more I do, the more I get used to it. And the more I do, the more joy I get from the experience. So virtue is like this. And my best example is this, exercising. Like I tell you, I have an addiction to fried chicken. I don't like to exercise. So how would Aristotle tell you to love exercise? Cultivate the excellence, right? It's by starting simple. If you start very strongly, like, okay, I'm just going to run 2.4, it's not going to work. Start saying, okay, maybe I'll do a small little exercise. And then when I start to enjoy it, slowly enjoying it, then I say, okay, maybe I'll try something more. Same thing with virtue. I want to be generous. But you don't start out too generous. You don't go around giving money to random people, right? You start out with little acts of generosity. And then from there, you gain that pleasure, you start to get used to it, then you pace yourself, you start doing more and more. So that is how we cultivate that virtue and excellence in us.
It's a journey of attaining it.
Yes.
And the happiness flows together with the journey.
Yes.
And not the end point.
Correct. It's the journey.
The end point.
Yeah.
Then you have to look for another
exactly.
journey of happiness.
That's why I like to think about.
Then you reach nirvana.
Of course, for Aristotle, there's no nirvana lah.
Nirvana is dullness.
Yeah.
There's no more to attain.
Well, since we talk about nirvana, it's interesting because there are some schools of Buddhism that will tell you nirvana is not a place that you go.
It's the state,
It's the state.
I know,
Yeah,
I mean
yeah.
the state too.
Yeah. So, but it's like music, like just because I become like a world-class professional musician, doesn't mean I stop practicing. No, I still have to practice to maintain my skill, yeah? So it doesn't mean, oh, I'm there already, I put down the instrument. No, I'm there, I still practice, I hone my skill. And why is the honing important? Because once you reach that state of excellence, you derive joy, you derive pleasure. It's that meaningful activity, that skill and meaningful activity that we talked about earlier. Yeah. Now, philosophy is always about provoking thoughts, right? I know some of these ideas from the earlier the ancient thinkers gave you some ideas already. But I have something for you all to think about. Consider this scenario. Paul, okay, let's say this fictitious guy, Paul leads a very active life. He always appears in a good mood. So every time you see him, he's like, smiling and everything. Very cheerful. He believes life is going well for him and he reports that he's satisfied with his life. At the end of the day, he returns home. Alone and with nothing to do, he feels depressed. He cries himself to sleep. And he tells you, because you're his friend, says, I've been doing this for months. Now, how many of you think that Paul is happy?
Earlier part of the day is happy.
So when he's out of the house, he's happy, but when he's back in the house, he's not happy.
Yeah.
Okay. How many of you will say, I don't think Paul is happy? Okay. So then the rest? Not sure. Half. So based on this, right, you notice what we're doing? We are looking at the whole emotional state view, right? And what are we saying? We're saying that essentially he's not, the attunement is not there, right? He can't feel at home in his own home. That's sad, right? So, okay, then let me change the story a little bit. Okay, let's say it's years since you met Paul, and now you meet him. Paul is in the hospital, dying of terminal disease. He says, I still cry myself to sleep because of the loneliness. But Paul says, this life is worth it because being single gave him that freedom to fulfill his life mission. He has no regrets. And if you ask him, would you risk being lonely and cry yourself to sleep every night? He says, yes, I will still do it. Do you think Paul is happy? How many of you want to raise your hands and say, yes, he's happy? Okay. So how many of you say, no, I still think he's not happy?
But some people say he's just deluding himself.
Sure, okay. Yeah, no, that's why I call it thought-provoking time, right? Yeah? Now, if you say that, yeah, based on what Paul says, then you say, yeah, based on the life satisfaction, meaning in life. So it's not about the feelings already, it's about the meaning, right? Then sure. Now, there's this book that I can recommend you. It's called A Very Short Introduction to Happiness. It is really very short. 1 hour can finish reading. Now, he says, what's interesting about this life satisfaction? I think Kinokuniya can get. Yeah, or if not, Amazon also can get. Yeah? So he says, you know what's interesting about life satisfaction? Events in our lives can make us change our criteria for a meaningful life. Not just our criteria, but also the cut-off of this criteria. Like, we say ABC. We say ABC can make us happy, but how much A, how much B, how much C, right? We also can decide that. And if you think about it, what Hebron says, it's very interesting because if we think about it, we actually arbitrarily decide this criteria for ourselves. And a lot of social science, when they interview people to ask, especially after they went through something tragic, like death of a loved one or whatever, what's the observation? People tend to lower their requirements for what they think is a happy life, a meaningful life. But still, at the end of the day, they say, yeah, I'm happy. So that's a very interesting thought, yeah? So unfortunate events can cause us to revise our criteria. But I think a more interesting question is, given how arbitrary the criteria is, Hebron puts up this interesting question. Maybe for those of us who think that we're not happy with our lives, we're not satisfied with our lives, could it be that our criteria is too high? Maybe we are already satisfied, we're already living meaningful and satisfied lives, but we don't realize it. That's interesting, isn't it? When I read this, I was like, oh, that's an interesting thought. Yeah. Now, let me end with one last thinker. Now, I've been talking about all the ancient people, right? Now, let me just jump a couple of centuries to this guy, Friedrich Nietzsche. Yeah. Now, Nietzsche has a very provocative idea. He says, you know what? As humans, we are very quick to sacrifice our happiness for meaning, for some greater cause. Yeah? And we have a tendency to convince ourselves that it's worth the sacrifice. Yeah. Now, he's not saying sacrifice is bad or per se or what, but he says, you know, there is something so beautiful about the human ability, the propensity to sacrifice. Like, think of every great person in the world, those people who have left their mark in history. They left their mark because they sacrificed something. Whether it is time, whether it is whatever, relationships or whatever, they sacrifice it to be able to pursue and achieve something greater, something higher. So there is some value to sacrifice. And perhaps there is some value to sacrificing certain things that may make us feel emotionally happy. Maybe, right? But he says, what's the problem with sacrifice? Because we humans are so quick to jump into sacrificing for any cause, we need to be very careful. Because not all sacrifices are actually life-affirming or life-giving. And on my way here, I was thinking of an example, and I remember I have a friend who likes to sacrifice. He's very duty-driven. So he's sacrificing in the name of an abstract concept. Duty, honor, loyalty. Is he happy? Every time I meet him, he's always miserable. Yeah? But yeah. No, he's really very miserable. It's like, oh, yeah, like that. But then he says, you know, like, okay, it's meaningful. Then the question is, maybe Nietzsche might be thinking about this kind of examples where, you know, he's sacrificing for the sake of sacrificing. He's sacrificing for a concept of duty, of loyalty. But is it actually affirming or worth living? Just now, when I showed you this part of Paul's life, the second scenario, some of you were like, maybe this sacrifice that Paul did is not worth it. Some of you think maybe it's worth it. We don't know the full details, right? But the obstacle for us to say whether he is really happy is, we don't know if the sacrifice was really worth it, right? So the main point, the main lesson is basically maybe we need to be more critical about the sacrifices we make as well, because not all are actually life-giving or life-affirming for ourselves. So, coming back, here are the two major ways that we can be happy, and like I say, we can achieve that either by changing perspective or by changing ourselves, transforming ourselves. Yeah. So, let's have a short discussion, and I guess you all can ask me questions also. But I guess in teaching, this is a way that we recollect and connect the dots, so that when you walk out of this room, you remember better, right? So let's have a discussion maybe with the person next to you, like, what insights resonated with you today? Yeah, and why? And after today's session, what is happiness to you? Shall we do that? 5 minutes? Thanks for the very warm discussions that you all had. So yeah, we have time for one or two questions. Anyone with burning questions that you all have? Or you're all enlightened now?
I just have a comment.
Yeah?
Something put up there. The first quote from Socrates: "A life not evaluated is not worth living."
Yeah.
I think that's very, very important, because it invites you to step away from who you are to really see who you can be. And when you do that, you give yourself a lot of leeway and freedom to choose your responses going forward.
Yeah.
If you get stuck in the way your normal patterns have brought you up in, the way you respond, the way your emotions are, the way you look at things, and you get stuck there all the time, and you don't reevaluate, you will never be able to see that you are much, much more.
That's true. Yeah, and I think one of the values of philosophy is having different ideas is already very empowering. Knowing that I don't have to stick to this mindset based on how I think about a situation. Yeah. So, any other questions or thoughts? Yeah.
It seems to me from today's talk that happiness is what you make it out to be. You know?
Yeah.
So if you want to be happy, very easy, drop your standard lah.
Maybe that is what it is, you know. Yeah. You like there was one line from the thought-provoking that actually struck me many years ago. I feel Chinese, so I cannot remember. Okay, but basically, it's he who knows, the one who knows contentment It's full.
It's
Full.
a
Full. F-U-L-L. Yeah.
Not F-O-L.
Yeah, no. Yeah, the one who knows contentment is rich lah. Yeah, is enriched. Yeah, is full. Yeah. So I think that maybe that is one perspective of it. Of course, if you, I'm a bit personally I'm a bit torn, because I kind of like the changing perspective things, because I do think that some of my perspectives are a bit out of whack lah. So maybe I do need better perspective, but I really love the Aristotelian version of becoming the best human being that I can be. Yeah, and I think there is some truth to it. That yeah. On one hand, if we go back to the to
On
what
the other hand, if you cannot become the best human being, then you'll be very unhappy, right?
being the best
You can
that,
be.
that I can be in my limitation, despite my limitations.
Yeah, so you drop your standard to what you are.
Yeah. No lah. I mean, in a sense, because you see, like, I talk about skill and meaningful activity as one of the other sources of happiness, right? This is what the science literature tells us, right? So, changing perspective can make us content about all these things, but we can also derive happiness from being excellent activity. And sure, I mean, we can say, yeah, maybe I'm not so good at this thing now, but why should we make ourselves so upset by saying, oh, I'm terrible at this thing, when we can slowly work our way to it. Say, okay, I may not be good today, I will be better tomorrow. And I think that's a very beautiful perspective to go with. Yeah. That's true. That's why I like to have. I like this quote. Wonder is the beginning of philosophy.
It is wonder.
It really is. You reminded me of.
Meaning you're chained and not allowed to think about that. There goes your happiness.
Yeah, that's right.
So leaders and political leaders, religious leaders must make sure that you keep that happiness, and that's propagated
Yes,
through freedom to be happy.
that's right. I wanted to say at the start of your comment, when I was planning like how to teach this class, right? If you look at a lot of courses on happiness, they normally do kind of what I do. We tell you what other people think, because you know why? In a course on happiness, the fastest way to make people angry is to tell them how to be happy. But I think there's a beauty here that yes, we all have our own individual happiness, and that's why there's value in knowing different perspectives. Here's what all these thinkers have to say. If I had another hour, I can expose you to more thinkers. But already, just a few thinkers in just 1 hour is already quite mind blowing, right? But I think at the end of the day, having that wonder is really the beginning of all that. So okay, well, our time is up. So I just want to say thank you so much. And if you want to stay in touch, you can. This is my LinkedIn. You can also contact me on this lah. So thank you so much. Well,